What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about 4 players who have kind of overachieved expectations through 2 weeks of the NFL season. These are players who have just boomed through 2 weeks. I think people are really, rising them up their rankings. They're becoming very, very valuable for fantasy football, and I just want to talk through these players, go through whether or not I think they can kind of sustain their production, whether they're going to fall off. Maybe I'm trying to sell high on them, or maybe I'm interested in retaining them on my roster. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Any last minute questions before Sunday, drop them down below. I'll make sure to get back to as many people as possible. But I feel like we got to start off here with Puka Nacua. He's really just come out of nowhere and absolutely been a huge fantasy factor through 2 weeks. He's actually the wide receiver 2 in points per game if we're only looking at the players who have played in both weeks. 26 PPR points per game, and he hasn't even scored a touchdown. That level of production with no touchdowns is just absurd. He's commanded a wild 35 targets, and he's caught 25 of them. Both of those stats lead the NFL. He's also number 1 in the NFL with a 39% target share and number 2 with a 41% target rate. Week 1, 10 receptions for 119 yards. Followed that up in week 2 with 15 receptions for 147 yards. This is really just like a mind-boggling start to his career. I mean, he was getting some hype heading into the season, but you were kind of just hoping he could be like a potential flex option, a weekly wide receiver 3 when there's bye weeks or injuries. I don't think one person on the planet expected him to produce how he has through 2 weeks. He was a 5th round pick in the most recent draft, and it's not like he was some sort of stud wide receiver in college, and not even like a player who went to a super small school, balled out, but maybe didn't get the respect because the competition wasn't great. He went to BYU as a senior. He only had 625 receiving yards in 9 games. So here's kind of where I stand on Puka Nacua here. I personally struggle to believe that he went from a good, solid college wide receiver to all of a sudden being one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL in only a year. I just find that pretty hard to believe, but I also think we can't just call this a fluke because there are some fluky games where someone will have a big day, but no one can command this type of volume. Even some of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now haven't had a 2-game stretch like this, so I'm kind of, playing in the middle here. I don't think that he's going to maintain this absurd production. I don't think he's going to overtake Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver 1 when Cooper Kupp comes back. But I also don't think he's just going to totally faceplant throughout the rest of the season. I think he's proven he's plenty talented. Do think he's going to come back down to earth a little bit, but I don't think that means he can't produce as a solid wide receiver 2 moving forward. I will say though, if someone thinks that he's going to maintain this insane production, obviously not 26 points per game, but if someone thinks he's a locked in wide receiver 1 rest of season, I'd be interested in kind of pivoting to a more proven guy. If someone's going to give you a Calvin Ridley or a Chris Olave for Puka Nacua, I would have to go out there and take it. But I'm kind of in the middle where I think he's proven he's very talented. I think he's going to be relevant throughout the rest of the season, but I don't think he's going to maintain this crazy high-end wide receiver 1 production. But really just a great story through 2 weeks here with Puka Nacua. Now the second player, we're actually going to stay on the same team and talk about Kyren Williams. I talked about him a little bit in my running back rankings video for week 3, but I kind of wanted to re-dive in a different video. Through 2 weeks, he's averaging 22.7 PPR points per game. He had top 10 finishes both in week 1 and in week 2. And I think in the short term, Kyren Williams is a really strong option week to week. He's averaging 14.5 carries per game. He's leading the NFL in targets at the running back position through 2 weeks. CMC might have jumped him, but obviously that's through 3 games. And then he's coming off a game where he had a 95% snap share and an 87% route participation. We also had Cam Akers traded to the Vikings, so it seems like this running back room is just wide open for Kyren Williams to just dominate the usage. Here's my concern with Kyren Williams. I'm not super convinced he's all that great of a running back. He was a 5th round pick. He's 5'9", weighing in at under 200 pounds, or at least at the combine or his pro day, he was under 200 pounds. And the reason why Kyren Williams slipped in the draft was because he was very small. That was a factor, but he was also not super athletic for his size. So he ran a 4.65 40, which is really rough at that size. He only had a 10th percentile speed score and then only a 21st percentile burst score. And then even looking at week 2, right, he had this huge workload. He produced really well for fantasy. he actually had the worst rushing yards over expected per attempt for week 2. So like the fantasy points look great, but in terms of like real life NFL production, it really wasn't all that great of a game. I also believe he had a dropped pass that got tipped up for an interception. So it's not like from a real life NFL perspective, Sean McVay is going to see that game and be like, all right, Kyren Williams got to be our locked in running back one moving forward. Plus, just looking back to last year, we know Sean McVay can be all over the place with this Rams running back room. Everyone thought Cam Akers would be the stud RB1 heading into the season. Darrell Henderson was the guy who got the clear RB1 snaps in week 1. Darrell Henderson didn't even finish the season on the roster. He was released mid-season after being their week 1 running back. Akers was a non-factor throughout most of the season and then dominated the touches in the last 4 games. We even saw Kyren Williams take one game as like the clear number 1. So I just don't think there's like a clear thing that's stopping Sean McVay from taking away touches from Kyren Williams. If he was going out, playing at a super high level, dominating with that huge workload, then I'd be more willing to buy in. But the fact that from like a real life NFL perspective, he really hasn't been that great, I struggled to see Sean McVay just force feeding him the ball throughout the entire season. I think we could have Ronnie Rivers slip in here. Zach Evans, I think, could, become a factor, or potentially just someone off the street. I just don't think Kyren Williams is like this established guy who has this role on lock. So if he can maintain this volume in the short term, I think he's a great, running back play, starting your lineup week to week. But I really just have no confidence he holds on to this role rest of season. And I think he is a very, very strong sell high at this point. If you can flip him for like top 12 running back, fringe top 12 running back, I can actually give you guys an example. Someone actually reached out and offered me this trade. I was giving up Kyren Williams, and I was receiving DeAndre Swift and Terry McLaurin. I'd probably take Swift over Kyren Williams just straight up. You get Terry McLaurin on top. These are some offers that could be out there for Kyren Williams if he is on your roster. So I'd go out, try to sell high if you can. Moving over to the next player, it's going to be another running back. It's Brian Robinson. I think a lot of people, including myself, expected this to be pretty much like a 50-50 split between Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. That is not what we have seen through 2 weeks. Brian Robinson has been the clear leader of this backfield, averaging 21.2 PPR points per game through the first 2 weeks. Last season, Brian Robinson did operate as the RB1, more of like a 1A, 1B situation once he returned from his like gunshot injury. But he had a 54% opportunity share last year. So he had the majority of the touches when he was there, but he's up to 78% so far in 2023. So a huge jump from 54 to 78%. Through 2 games, he's averaging 18.5 carries per game. Antonio Gibson is still going to be the guy who's used primarily as like the top receiving option, but we've even seen Brian Robinson's target share go up. Nothing crazy, right? But he was at 3.5% last year. He's up to 7.9% through 2 weeks. I don't expect Brian Robinson to maintain his fantasy production. He's been elevated by 3 touchdowns through 2 weeks. Like, I don't think he's going to keep that pace over a 17-game season. But I think he's in a decent spot to kind of maintain this workload. This is back-to-back seasons where the Commanders have kind of turned to him to be their lead guy. So I don't think he's going to be like a locked-in top 10 running back rest of season, but I do view him as like a very, very strong weekly running back too. Probably like a mid to high-end RB2 option at this point, especially with some of the injuries to the running back position. So I think Brian Robinson's kind of going to keep this train rolling as long as he can hold on to that clear-cut RB1 role. And I mean, he's been solid through 2 weeks, so I don't really see any signs of him like, losing it anytime soon. And now moving into the fourth and final kind of huge breakout here through 2 weeks, it's going to be Nico Collins. He's averaging 20.8 PPR points per game, coming off of back-to-back impressive performances. Week 1, 6 receptions for 80 yards. Week 2, 7 for 146 and a touchdown. Personally, I did expect Nico Collins to be the wide receiver 1 for the Texans, but overall, I just did not expect their passing attack to be as strong as it's been. Looking at Nico Collins, he has a 23.3% target share, so that's a strong number. Like, coming into the season, you told me that was his target share. I would have said that was a huge win. But over a full season, that 23% target share number is not going to align with his current 10 target per game pace. He's kind of benefited from the Texans just going super pass heavy through 2 weeks. They have 91 total pass attempts. in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. It's very, very unlikely that they maintain that pace. I do think it's encouraging that they've been down in games. That's probably going to be a trend that continues, and that they're willing to let, CJ Stroud just go out there and sling it. I think that's a good sign, but over 45 pass attempts per game, that's not going to stick over an entire season. So I do think his volume, at least in terms of like volume per game, is going to go down. But if he can maintain the same share of this offense, I think he's in a good spot. I think he's already pretty much paid off from where you drafted him. But I view him as more like a wide receiver 3, maybe like fringe wide receiver 2 rest of season. He's currently a wide receiver 1. I might have said running back, I meant wide receiver. He's currently a wide receiver 1 in points per game. I don't think that's going to stick, but I think he's going to be someone you can trust in your lineup, throwing him into the wide receiver slot or a flex option. So if you did draft Nico Collins, I think he's a guy who can kind of stick around on your roster. If someone is going to go crazy and pay up like a mid-tier wide receiver 2 price, I'd be willing to ship him off, but I don't think it's like his value is just going to plummet over the next few weeks. It seems like he has a solid role in this offense. CJ Stroud has wildly impressed through 2 weeks, and he has looked like the number 1 guy. So those are going to be the 4 players. We had Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, Brian Robinson, and Nico Collins. General consensus, I'm expecting, pretty much all 4 of these guys to kind of come back down to earth. But there are certain guys I'm more confident in moving forward, potentially keeping them on my roster. Others, maybe trying to sell high while we can right now. That's going to wrap it up for this one. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.